defendants are present. The defendant is present with Mr. Chesnoff, Mr. DeGuerin, and we have Mr. Henderson, and Bailey, and Miata, and Lewin. You may continue your examination of the defendant.
Mr. Durst, on the dig note, which is up again, can you see that? Look up on the screen. Do you see where
I can see it.
Do you see where it says shovel, or, and question mark? Can you explain what would the or and question mark refer to?
I have no idea.
Well, would you agree that it wouldn't make sense that if all you're writing is that supposed to mean snow shovel, you wouldn't have or and a question mark, correct?
No, not correct. I just said I don't know what it stands for, why I wrote it.
Well, would you agree, Mr. Durst, that if we assume that these are all options for how to get rid of your wife's body, you would agree, if that were true, that the or and the question mark would make sense, right?
I am not willing to assume that this had anything to do with getting rid of a body.
So I'm just asking you, please tell us, you're looking at it right now, it's your writing. You have other underlined. What does that mean?
No idea.
Well, is other going to be part of a list?
You just asked me that, and I said I have no idea.
Well, would you agree, Mr. Durst, that right before it, you have town dump, bridge, dig, boat, other, and then shovel or question mark? Do you agree that it would appear in reading it that all of those things appear to be connected?
No.
If you think of, Mr. Durst, while you're testifying, if you think of what the line meant under other, or what shovel or question mark meant, or whether you can now answer whether it's truck or trunk, let me know and I'll re-ask it. So if you think of it, let me know. Let's go back to...
Object to the form of the question.
You may ask, will you let me know?
Yeah, Mr. Durst, will you let me know? Thank you, Your Honor, I'm sorry. Will you let me know if you end up coming...
Your Honor, this is just 352, please.
Oh, overruled.
Mr. Durst, you mentioned that Diane Boucher, your words were, she had, quote, industrial strength tampons. Do you recall saying that?
She said she had industrial strength tampons, pads, and adult diapers.
What does industrial strength tampons even mean?
I would not know. I don't use tampons.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that for a woman having gynecological surgery, would you agree, even as a non-expert, that it would seem strange that she would be buying tampons to insert in an area where she's just had surgery? Does that sound strange to you?
No, that does not sound strange to me at all.
Okay, let's go back to Garberville. I was asking you, does it cost $9 grand to buy a pound of weed?
I paid $5,000.
You're paying $5,000 for a pound of marijuana?
Correct.
And is that what you've always paid? Is that what you paid before you went in? When were you paying $5 grand a pound?
I paid him $5 grand for a long time.
And you were paying $5 grand a pound in 2000?
Correct.
Well, if you were paying $5 grand, why'd you take out $9 grand? Tip?
Why not?
Why not? Okay. You didn't buy a gun with that $9 grand, did you?
No, I did not buy a gun with the $9 grand.
And your testimony is that you bought, so you went down and you bought a pound of marijuana from your old friend from college days, correct? Is that correct?
Correct.
You know, I noticed, Mr. Durst, when you were testifying, you didn't give a name. Why didn't you give the guy's name? Why did you just call him an old friend from college?
Well, I don't want to get him in trouble.
You're concerned that in 2021, he's going to get in trouble for a pound of weed that he sold 21 years ago. Is that your testimony?
My testimony is I did not use his name because I did not want him to get in trouble.
Well, here, you don't have a choice. What's his name?
Danny Cunningham.
Danny Cunningham. I assume his name is Daniel Cunningham?
I knew him as Danny Cunningham.
And you knew him from college. That means you went to school with him at Lehigh?
First of all, I should have. Each of these things that you bring up has to do with me abbreviating something or speaking loosely. So I have to speak very, very careful that what I say is 100% accurate. I did not know him from my college days. I knew him from my graduate school days when we were both at UCLA in the PhD program for economics.
Well, Mr. Durst, were you actually in the PhD program in economics, or did you just say you were?
I was in the program.
For how long were you actually in the program taking classes?
3 years.
You took 3 years worth of classes at UCLA in their program? From when to when?
Yeah, from 1965 to 1968.
Were you full-time taking classes?
No, I did not take them. I did not go full time.
How many units did you complete at UCLA?
Don't remember.
Well, did you, if you took it for 3 years, that would seem like you would probably have accumulated enough units to get your master's degree, correct?
I guess. I don't know.
So approximately, Mr. Durst, did you take 1 class a year? Did you take 4 classes a quarter? How many classes did you take during those 3 years at UCLA?
Well, at that time, UCLA was on a trimester system, and I was taking 2 trimesters each year, and I took 2 or 3 classes each trimester.
And tell me about Daniel Cunningham. What do you know about him?
What do I know about him?
Yes, tell me everything you know about Daniel Cunningham.
That will take quite a while.
Oh, I'll wait.
Okay. So Daniel Cunningham dropped out of the PhD program at about the same time that I did. And he moved to Garbersville, and he bought land contiguous with the redwood forest.
Let me stop you. How old is Daniel Cunningham?
About my age, I guess.
And how tall is he?
Taller than me.
Give me approximate height and weight.
Let's say 5'9", 160 pounds.
Is he a male white? Is he a white guy?
He's a white guy.
And your testimony is that he moved to Garberville when?
Around 1968 or 1969.
And when he moved up there, he became a, was he growing marijuana? What was the deal?
He grew marijuana.
What county is Garberville in?
Humboldt.
And so your testimony is that he would grow marijuana and you would buy it from him?
Correct.
You didn't have a connection closer to Trinidad or Eureka where you would buy marijuana?
No.
How often did you buy marijuana from him when you lived there?
Probably every 4 to 6 months.
So a pound of marijuana would last you 4 to 6 months?
Correct.
And it's your testimony that you would pay about $5 grand for the pound?
Correct.
And when's the last time you had contact with Daniel Cunningham?
Probably around 2007.
And how many times do you think over the years you bought weed from Daniel Cunningham?
20.
20 times? And you would always pay cash?
Yes,
Would you always drive to Garberville to get the weed?
yes.
So you've driven there approximately 20 times, is that correct?
I've been to Garberville more times than I bought marijuana there.
What else were you doing in Garberville?
There's a restaurant in Garberville that I like.
Which restaurant is that?
Odell's.
Oh, what's Odell's?
It's a restaurant.
What is it still? Is Odell's still around?
I have no idea.
What kind of restaurant was Odell's?
American food.
And I want you to tell me exactly how you would get to Danny's house. Give me the roads you would take. Where exactly does he live? Let's start with what's his address?
He's off the grid. He uses a post office box. Or he used a post office box.
He's off the grid. So if he's off the grid, how would you find him to buy marijuana?
I knew where he lived, and he had lunch in Garbersville every Tuesday and Thursday.
So have you ever been to where he lives?
Yeah,
Yes?
yeah.
Describe exactly where he lived and how you would get there.
You would take the road that goes between Route 101 and Route 1 and turn off.
Let me stop you. Which road is that?
I don't know the name of it.
It goes between where?
Between Garbersville and what they call the Lost Coast, where Route 1 ends.
So would that mean then, I would assume you're saying that if you're coming down the 101, is that correct? Then you would go west on this road towards the water, is that correct?
Correct.
And so you turn on this road. We'll bring up a map later for you so you can direct us. So tell me, where did he live?
You would take the road from 101 and you would get off where you should get off and go north about half a mile, and that would be Danny Cunningham's farm.
So, Mr. Durst, would you agree that telling me you would get off at, quote, the road where you're supposed to get off is not a description that anyone could ever find? Would you agree?
Sure.
What's the road?
I don't know the name of the road.
Mr. Durst, you have a photographic memory for all kinds of things and places. You said you've been to buy weed from him 20 times, correct?
Object to the comment.
I think it's argumentative. Description of his photographic memory is your characterization of his memory. So it's in the nature of an argument.
Mr. Durst, would you agree that you have an incredible memory?
Oh,
You've been able to cite, Mr. Durst, just off the top of my head, the minimum wage in Vermont in the late 70s. You've been able to talk about the addresses of buildings in New York. You've been able to talk about the time that you actually first met Susan. You knew the name of the pool and how to spell it. So my question to you is, how is it that knowing all that information, you cannot tell us anything more about a place you went to 20 times to buy weed?
I think all those questions are questions for the psychology type lady.
Well, you would agree, Mr. Durst, that the psychology type lady, she can't assess whether a witness is up there lying, correct?
She discussed at great length how people's memories work.
Do you agree, Mr. Durst, that a person can have memory that they don't remember, or they can have selective memory where they choose to remember things and don't choose to remember others? Would you agree that's how people work?
She talked at length about how memories change over time. And I do not think I have an incredible memory.
So, Mr. Durst, the road that you would get off at, you have no memory. Let's ask you this. How far was it when you went from the 101 and you went west on the road that heads towards the 1? How far would it be from the 101?
10 minutes.
How many miles?
8, maybe.
8?
Maybe.
Okay. And then you would get off at this unnamed road, and what would you do? Which way would you go?
You'd go north about half a mile,
Okay.
and that would bring you to Danny Cunningham's farm.
So you had a farm. Tell me about this farm.
Well, in addition to growing marijuana, he sold organic eggs and organic tomatoes.
Did you have like one of those road sign, like, you know, stands of tomatoes, eggs, and weed?
He did not have a stand. You'd have to go to his barn where he would be, and you tell him what you want. Sometimes he had squash. Sometimes he had zucchini.
So, and how big was this farm?
Probably 100 acres or so.
Did he live there by himself?
He lived there with his wife and 3 children, and they were off the grid.
What does that
This
mean?
meant when being off the grid meant really being off the grid. He did not have electricity, and he did not have a telephone.
If he did not have electricity, how does he run a 100-acre farm?
How does he what?
How does he run a 100-acre farm without electricity?
How does he run a 100-acre farm without electricity?
Yes, you've repeated my question. Yes, that's my question.
I have no idea what you mean by how does he run it.
Mr. Durst, would you agree that with what you've described, to have a farm like that, you would need electricity, correct?
No, the Amish in Pennsylvania don't have electricity, and they farm huge amounts of land.
Was he Amish?
No, I'm
Did he-
using that as an example.
Did he have a bunch of Amish relatives who were at his farm running everything?
Say that again.
Let's not say that again. I think you've made a point.
Sure.
Mr. Lewin, will you move to a different subject?
Mr. Durst, so you say that you went down there, and on the day that you bought the weed, where did you meet him?
At his farm.
How did you know he was going to be there?
He wasn't
52,
there,
wait
his
the
wife
time.
would have been there.
I'm sorry?
352, the part of 352 that
This-
says wait the time.
This is best question out of 10. I'm gonna allow it.
How about the other 10?
Well, it's too late. That's gone. Time's lost forever. You can go ahead and ask this question.
How do you know you were
If
coming?
he was not there, his wife would have been there.
And how did you make arrangements to make your purchase? Did you do it by email?
He was always there, and he always had marijuana.
Did he actually grow it on site?
Yes,
Did you? How much marijuana was he growing?
I don't know.
Was it a lot or a little?
A lot,
You would agree a pound of marijuana is a lot of marijuana, correct?
correct.
So that day you drove down there. I assume if you didn't have electricity, you had no phone, right?
No, he had no phone, he had no electricity.
So you go down there and you meet him, and he didn't know you were coming, correct?
Correct.
So he happens to be there and you pick up the pound of weed from him?
I pick up a pound of weed from him, yes.
How long did that take?
How long did it take to do what?
How long did it take for you to get there and get your weed?
I think I stayed a couple of hours.
Was the weed all ready for you when you got there?
Oh, the weed. He harvests the weed whenever it should be harvested. There was weed available when I got there.
Was it all packaged up for you, ready to go?
I don't think they pack it up.
Was it like when you go to a lobster place and you get to pick your lobsters, did you walk out and pick what marijuana you wanted? Tell us how that worked.
I'd go and I'd say, I'm here and I want a pound, and he would tell me how much, and I would give him $5,000, and he would give me a bag of marijuana.
So you were there a couple of hours. What did you do during that time?
We hung out.
So, and what time did you get there?
Around noon.
So what did you do between 8 and noon?
Well, it takes about an hour to get from Eureka to Garbersville.
Okay, so you had to drive. You went to the bank first, right?
I went to the bank in Eureka.
And then you drove down to Garberville, right?
Correct.
Doesn't take, let's say you get to the bank at 9, you just have to take out a little money. You should be there no later than 10:30, agreed?
I don't know.
As you're answering the questions, Mr. Durst, isn't it true that you are realizing that your timeline falls apart with every question I ask? You're aware of that, correct?
You were asking me these specific questions about a very casual experience I had. I wasn't watching my watch the whole time and writing down where I was every 10 minutes.
Well, your friend Diane Boucher is sitting there having surgery, standing around with her industrial strength tampons. Shouldn't you be watching your watch pretty carefully so you can come play nursemaid to your friend?
I'm just remembering my own operations. After the operation, you would always wake up in the recovery room and be asked to stay in the recovery room until you were well enough to walk. When Diane told me that her procedure would take 3 or 4 hours, she did not seemingly include the amount of time that she would have to wait in the recovery room before they released her.
But Mr. Durst, you have no way to communicate with her because you don't have a cell phone. So she has to leave messages for you, allegedly, on your voicemail, correct?
Allegedly, she left a voicemail message. I think she left 2 of them, actually.
But you would agree, Mr. Durst, that at 3 o'clock, 7 hours later, you're still in Garberville making calls, right?
Correct.
So you end up going, you get to Danny's house around noon. You spend 2 hours there, correct?
About.
What are you doing there for 2 hours other than buying the weed?
What did Danny and I and his wife and kids do for 2 hours? We hung out.
So how old were the kids?
The last time I saw them, I think the oldest was 12 and the youngest was 5.
So they were there, is that right? They were there at the house on the 20th?
Yes.
What day of the week was the 20th?
I don't. Well, I can figure it out.
Mr. Balian, can you give us, it's on the timeline?
Okay, I'm working my out.
Would have been a Wednesday.
So, the kids weren't in school?
They were doing homeschooling.
Oh, they're off the grid, they did homeschooling. Okay, so you hang out with everybody, and that takes a couple hours, and then what do you do?
Well, eventually,
What's that?
probably around 3 o'clock, I left Cartersville and drove back to Eureka.
Didn't you originally say that you had lunch with your friend from college?
While I was at his house, we ate.
Well, you didn't mention that though right now when I just asked you. Did you forget that detail?
I didn't happen to mention it. I didn't tell you what else we did.
Well, I asked you to tell me everything you did, and you didn't mention lunch. Do you agree?
If I did not mention lunch, I did not mention lunch.
Have you found, Mr. Durst, that in the past you've admitted to lying and committing perjury, correct? You've admitted that, right?
Correct.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that you have found, when you personally lie and commit perjury, that you like to include a lot of details when you are committing your lies and perjury? Would you agree that's a fair assessment?
Object to
No,
comment,
that is not a fair.
argument.
Overruled. Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that just because...
Is it a new question, or am I answering the old question?
No, you just answered the other question. I'm answering asking another question. Would you agree, Mr. Durst?
I'm still on, would you agree that I include a lot of details when I commit perjury?
I thought you said
I
that's not
committed-
true. Go ahead, you can answer that again, but I thought you answered it.
The 2 times I committed perjury had to do with telling the court in Galveston that I was in Northern California when I was in Southern California. In terms of including lots of details, I don't include more details than I think are necessary to answer the question.
So, for instance, when you told Detective Struck that you spoke to Kathy Durst on the night of January 31st, when she was back at Riverside Drive, you also added the detail that that occurred between 10:30 and 11, correct?
I don't remember.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that you also added the detail that she was watching the news?
Yeah,
That was a lie, right?
that was a lie.
And that was an extra detail, 2 details that you added to try to sell your story, correct?
Correct.
So instead of just saying, I talked to Kathy, you use a narrative where you say, correct, I talked to Kathy, it was about 10:30 or 11, she was watching the news. You include those details, Mr. Durst, because you found in your life of lying that when you include extra details like that, people tend to believe you more, right?
I do not have a life of lying. I have no idea what makes people believe one thing as opposed to another.
So, did you make any effort to find Danny to bring him into court to testify?
What would he testify to?
Well, Mr. Durst, would you agree that if Danny came into court, he's either going to say your story happened or he's going to say your story is one giant lie? It's going to be one or the other, right?
I guess
Give me the
now
grounds.
on
I'm
legal
at a
now,
loss for what
so he would have no problem acknowledging that he grows and sells marijuana.
So the answer, you would agree, Mr. Durst, is that you agree it would be helpful to have Danny in court to say, hey, listen, yeah, Bob Durst came down that day. I was sitting off the grid with my wife and children who don't go to school, growing squash, organic things, eggs, and marijuana on my 100-acre ranch without electricity, located off of that road where you know you get off. And he could tell that story, correct?
Argumentative and 352.
I'll sustain 352.
Okay, Mr. Durst, how come you didn't make any effort to
Am
find
I
Danny?
answering this question, or is this a new question?
No, the judge sustained my objection, so you don't answer it.
Okay?
The judge sustained not my objection.
Right, no, it's, I sustained
The judge
the
sustained
objection.
an objection, so you don't answer. So my question is, it's the new one I just asked, did it catch up?
Objection 352.
Well, he didn't ask it yet, but the last question that you asked, it was not answered. I will sustain a 352 objection on that as well.
Mr. Durst, how come you did not make any effort to locate Danny and bring him to trial?
Objection
Oh,
352.
hell.
What was the ground, Your Honor?
352.
All right. Mr. Durst, would you agree that if Danny were available, that he could help your case?
Objection 352.
Sustain.
All right, I'll move on.
I've got 5 questions here that you have not given me an opportunity to.
Judge has sustained the objection.
I sustain the objection, Mr. Durst. You don't answer when I sustain the objection to a question.
Mr. Durst, would you agree that prior to taking the stand on direct examination, you had never mentioned anything about Danny or buying marijuana in Garberville?
Objection 352.
That's overruled.
Am I going to get an opportunity to answer the question you previously asked me?
Well, you can answer that question, the last question.
I think that if I brought Danny Cunningham here and he
That's not the,
confirmed
Mr.
everything
Durst.
that I said,
Mr. Durst,
you would not really.
Stop. The judge is talking to you.
Mr. Durst, I don't want to hear about what your lawyers did or did not do bringing witnesses to court. That last question is a good question, and I'll let you answer Mr. Lewin's last question, all right?
Yeah, and the reason you don't want to hear it, Your Honor.
It's not relevant,
Right. Thank you.
okay? It's more prejudiced. It doesn't prove very much. It's confusing. Can be misleading and misunderstood.
Thank you,
It's
Your
too
Honor.
complicated to establish this fact in question, which I think you're getting at with this question, which is a good question. You may answer this good question.
Could you repeat the question you want me to answer?
Sure. You would agree, Mr. Durst, that prior to your testimony on direct examination, you had never mentioned Danny or buying marijuana in Garberville to any investigator, to any media person, to anybody in this case?
Who would I possibly have mentioned it to?
Well, Mr. Durst, isn't it true that during your March 2015 interview that I asked you what you were doing down in Garberville? Is that correct?
I probably did not want to tell the cops that I was buying marijuana.
RD 500, 31515, page 85, line 9, to page 86, line 2.
spinning wheel, if you want to read it.
What was that?
The wheel is just spinning.
Okay, Mr. Durst, isn't it true that during your interview with me, the following exchange took place? Question, so with Susan, when you end up, you flew out here to see her. Answer, flew out here? Question, flew out to Los Angeles, I'm sorry, to San Francisco on December 19th, right? No audible response. Question, you made the call from the plane. No response. You went to San Fran, you went to Eureka, you went to the Ford dealership, right? No audible response. You picked up the car, and then the next day, I don't know if you know this, you made phone calls. Answer, I'm going, question continues, from Garberville. So where are you going? Why were you down there? Answer, I'm trying to remember what exactly I was doing in Garberville, and I've tried to remember, and I really don't know. Question, you weren't going to San Francisco though, right? Because you had just come from San Francisco the day before, so that doesn't make sense. Answer, no, I wasn't going to San Francisco. Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that you had the opportunity during that question to say, I was buying marijuana in Garberville?
I had the opportunity, but it would be the last thing I would have done. Because if I told you I was buying marijuana, you would ask me who I was buying it from, and that would have gotten my friend possibly in trouble.
So, Mr. Durst, you were worried about your friend getting in trouble for selling a pound of marijuana 15 years before, when you were, at that time, concerned that you were going to be charged with capital murder. Is that your testimony?
Yes.
Do you agree, Mr. Durst, that you could have said at that time, hey, listen, I was buying marijuana from somebody, but I'm not going to tell you who it was? You could have certainly said that as well, correct?
I could have.
So, Mr. Durst, isn't it true that the reason you did not say anything of the kind is because you had not made up this preposterous story about buying marijuana from Danny in Garberville?
Object 352.
So,
No, all right. It is actually argumentative to the way it was phrased. In other words, the characterization of preposterous is an argument.
I'll rephrase it, Your Honor.
Yes.
Do we have the clip?
Yes.
Play the clip, Mr. Durst.
with Susan, when you end up, you flew out here to see her. Flew out to Los Angeles, I'm sorry, San Francisco on December 19th, right? You made the call for the plane, right? You went to Eureka, you went to the Ford dealership, right? You picked up the car, and then the next day, I don't know if you know this, you made phone calls for Garberville. So where were you going? Why were you down there?
I remember what exactly I was doing in Garberville, and I tried to remember, and I really don't know.
You weren't going to San Francisco though, right? Because you had just come from San Francisco the day before, so that doesn't make sense.
I didn't go to San Francisco.
Mr. Durst, can you
I think I should answer your question.
Okay.
No, what I've described is not preposterous.
Okay. My other question would be, Mr. Durst, why would you not simply say, you know what, I remember where I was, but I can't tell you?
Because I did not. I did what I did. Why exactly I told you what I told you during that interview is a completely different question. I was trying to get you to offer me a plea bargain.
So, Mr. Durst, you would agree, though, that in trying to assess why you said what you said, that the jury is sitting here and they're hearing what you said, and I'm asking you to explain what you said, would you agree that when they're assessing whether it's true, that they need to understand what it is you're saying and why it is you're saying it? Agreed?
They need to understand what it is I'm saying and why I am saying it. Sure.
So you didn't have any problem during that interview repeatedly saying things to me such as, I'm going to stay away from that. I don't want to talk about that. Or just not answering at all, correct? You did that repeatedly during the interview, is that right?
I guess.
Well, Mr. Durst, what you did here is, instead of saying, I don't want to answer it, you said, I'm trying to remember what exactly I was doing in Garberville, and I've tried to remember, and I really don't know. That's what you said, correct?
Correct.
So your statement is right now that that was a lie. You were deliberately lying because you did remember. Is that correct?
I lied to you. That doesn't count.
Oh, wait, let me understand this. So lying to myself and police officers doesn't count. Can you please explain that?
Lying to you does not count.
Did you have your fingers crossed like under the table? So that's why it doesn't count? What does it mean it doesn't count?
It doesn't count. I was working on a plea bargain with you.
So would you agree, Mr. Durst, that other than your words about this person, Danny, and buying this marijuana, that there is no other evidence in this case other than your statement that it happened? Is that correct?
When I got back to Trinidad, I sold approximately a quarter pound of my pound to a guy I knew in Trinidad.
Who was that person?
Gregory something or other.
How exactly would we locate Gregory something or other?
How would you locate him? This was 20 years ago. I don't know how to locate him.
And you agree, Mr. Durst? By the way, have you ever mentioned, even in this testimony,
Nobody ever asked me if I used the whole pound myself or if I sold parts of it.
Mr. Durst, you're a multimillionaire. Why would you be selling marijuana?
Why not?
I don't know. It's a felony. You could go to prison.
Well, they tried that in Louisiana and decided that they didn't want to charge me with distributing marijuana.
Because, Mr. Durst, you don't buy marijuana to sell it. You buy marijuana to smoke it, correct?
I buy marijuana to smoke it.
Have you
Well,
ever...
if a friend of mine wants some, I'm happy to sell him some.
So, you're so generous with your friends that being a multimillionaire, if they want marijuana, you won't give it to them, you're going to sell it to them.
If they want a joint, I'll give them a joint. If they want a quarter pound, I'll sell them a quarter pound.
Do you mark it up when you sell it? Do you make a profit on it?
No,
So, how many times in your life have you sold marijuana?
dozen
A dozen?
or dozens.
And, Mr. Durst, why would you be selling marijuana when you're a multimillionaire?
I just told you, somebody wanted more than a very small amount, I would charge them for it.
Mr. Durst, do you understand that there are legal consequences for selling marijuana that are different than just smoking marijuana or giving marijuana away?
I just went through that the same day I did the interview with you, and Louisiana decided not to charge me with distributing marijuana because they felt it was ridiculous.
Mr. Durst, there was no allegation in marijuana that you sold anything. You just had a large amount of marijuana with you, correct?
Correct.
So you're asking this jury to believe, I just want to make sure I understand this, that in addition to the story that you've said about Danny and the kids and the farm, etc., that now you took some of that marijuana back and you sold a quarter of it to somebody, what was his name again?
Gregory.
Gregory something or other, correct?
Correct.
All right, let me move on. So, what time were you supposed to arrive at Susan's in Los Angeles?
I was supposed to arrive Friday night, the 22nd, whenever I got there.
So, you went back on the 20th, you eventually went back to Trinidad, is that correct?
Went back to Trinidad on the 20th.
And what did you do when you went back? Did you go straight home?
Well, I had sold my house a year before. I went with Diane to her house.
So, you picked up Diane at the hospital? You picked her up at the hospital?
Yeah,
What time was that?
around 4.
Well, when you say around 4, you're making calls from Garberville about 3 o'clock, so it's an hour, you said. So you would agree you couldn't have picked her up before 4 o'clock, correct?
Well, I think I've said it's 45 minutes to an hour. The road that takes you from Eureka to Garbersville goes right through the redwood forest. It's very difficult to time things because frequently you would get behind a big truck with lots of logs on them and you'd go 30 miles an hour for a long period of time.
And you can get stuck behind a truck with a lot of logs. Had the logs ever come up where you've had to bow saw them? I'll withdraw the question.
I'll answer the question.
No, I'll withdraw it. So, Mr. Durst, what time approximately did you pick up Diane Boucher from the
I
hospital?
just did that approximately 4 o'clock.
So, you pick her up 8 hours after you dropped her off, is that right?
Correct.
And where was she when you picked her up?
She was in the recovery room.
And did she tell you how her surgery had gone?
She told me it went well.
And did she tell you how long was she already awake and waiting for you to come there?
She was awake but druggy.
Druggy. And was she in a hospital bed still?
Yes.
So how did you get her out to the car?
In a wheelchair, they took her out.
And was she conscious?
She was conscious, and she said that she was in better shape than she expected to be.
So you get her in the car and you take her back to her place, is that correct?
We get in her car. We get in my car. I drive.
She really can't drive, I assume, right?
Well, it was my car.
Well, she's not in condition to drive at this point, I'm assuming, right?
Correct.
So how long is the ride home?
I just told you about an hour.
No, from the hospital to her place.
Oh, from the Eureka Hospital to Trinidad, it's 20 minutes.
So it was Eureka Hospital, was that the name of it?
It was Humboldt County Hospital.
Yeah, you said Humboldt County Hospital before, and now you're saying Eureka Hospital, correct?
The hospital's in Eureka. It is the only hospital in Humboldt County.
What's that hospital called?
I think it's called the Humboldt County Hospital.
So why did you just call it Eureka Hospital a moment ago?
352A.
352A. Okay, just a moment. Hospital is in Eureka. Hospital. Hospital called. What kind of hospital? What did you call Eureka? Hospital. Minutes ago. He may answer that question. Overruled.
So what is the question?
You previously called it Eureka Hospital, now you're calling it Humboldt County Hospital,
I
which is,
misspoke when I called it the Eureka Hospital. The hospital is in Eureka.
and you said there was only one hospital in all of Humboldt County, is that correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
Are you aware that there are currently 3 hospitals in Humboldt County, Mr. Durst?
I have no idea what the situation is now. In 2000, there was just one hospital.
Are you sure?
Am I sure?
Are you sure that in 2000, listen to my question carefully, are you sure that in 2000, Mr. Durst, you are positive that there was only one hospital in Humboldt County?
352A, waste of time.
Overruled.
I remember one hospital which went by the name of Humboldt County Hospital.
So there was one hospital that you remember for sure was called Humboldt County Hospital, and your belief is that was the only hospital in the county, is that correct?
Correct.
So, I think I'd asked this, but I don't remember what the answer was. What time were you supposed to arrive at Susan's in Los Angeles?
Susan knew I was driving, and the trip took 12 to 13 hours. She expected me sometime in the evening.
So, that is on the 22nd, correct?
Correct.
So what did you do? So you get home on the 20th, and I assume is Diane still in a pretty drugged out situation?
She could walk.
So you take her inside. Do you cook her dinner?
She makes dinner.
So what did she make for you that night?
I don't remember.
But so she made you dinner, is that correct?
Yes.
So this drugged out woman who's just had surgery, who you're having to get assistance in the car, you go home, you don't pick her up till 4 o'clock, and she then comes home and makes you dinner? Is that your testimony?
I wish I could make facial expressions like you. Yes, that is my testimony.
Does it sound reasonable, Mr. Durst?
Yes, it sounds reasonable.
Well, I haven't asked my question yet. So Mr. Durst,
You're going to ask me if normal people go to the hospital and make dinner after going to the hospital. I'll tell you, I figure normal people probably do make dinner after they go to the hospital.
so it's your position that people undergo serious surgery where they are in the hospital.
Remember, this is outpatient. She was not an inpatient.
Well,
I think this is probably, she called it a procedure. I don't think there was anything. I've never seen the word serious come before procedure.
You're saying though, Mr. Durst, it was a 3 to 4 hour procedure, and you're saying that when you picked her up 8 hours later, she is still drugged out and has to be helped to the car, correct?
She's druggy. The hospital always takes their patients down in a wheelchair.
But you said she was drugged out, correct?
I said she was druggy.
Druggy?
Druggy, yes.
What's the difference between...
D-R-U-G-G-Y, druggy.
Okay, what's the difference between drugged out and druggy?
Druggy seems more minor than drugged out.
So she was druggy, but she came home and then was able to cook you dinner? That's your testimony.
Yes,
Does that sound credible to you?
very, very, very credible to me.
Mr. Durst, did you maybe think of, I don't know, bringing home takeout to assist your friend who's just had surgery so she wouldn't have to cook you dinner?
She liked
352,
to
Your Honor,
cook.
objection.
What, just a moment. Bringing takeout. Sustained.
So, what kind of care did you give? But did she do the dishes after dinner too?
352.
Yes, she did everything that needed to be done in the kitchen.
Did she do any cleaning of the house that you noticed that night?
She had a housekeeper who came in 3 times a week.
Was the housekeeper there that night?
No, housekeeper would have been there during the day.
Well, did the housekeeper see you at all when you were there?
I did not see the housekeeper.
How many days were you there in total?
I was there the 20th, the 21st, and the morning of the 22nd, and the night of the 19th.
So if she comes in 3 days a week, Mr. Durst, and you're there for more than 3 days in total, how do you not run into the housekeeper?
I don't remember seeing the housekeeper.
So that night, did you have to help Diane Boucher at all?
Did I have to help her at all? I don't think so.
Well, wouldn't you remember, Mr. Durst, if you had to help your friend who just had surgery?
Does taking the remote off of the table and giving it to her in bed, would that consider helping her?
Well, I meant, what did you do? I want to know, what did you do?
We hung out. We had we listened to music, we watched TV.
Wasn't she druggied out at this point?
She was less druggy as time went on.
Well, wasn't she taking drugs for the pain from that surgical procedure?
352A.
I like the A part, 352A. Well, I think you're exhausting this.
All right. So, Mr. Durst, what time did you get up the next morning?
7, 8,
What did you do on the 21st?
are we on the 20th or the 21st?
We're now on the 21st.
On the 21st, we walked to the coffee place in Trinidad and had breakfast.
How far was the place that you walked to?
Quarter of a mile.
And she didn't express to you that she was at all sore. She wanted to walk after a surgery the day before.
Yes,
And it's your testimony that at this time she had ovarian cancer, is that correct?
I don't know when the ovarian cancer was diagnosed.
So she ends up, you walk with her the quarter mile. I assume you walked the quarter mile home as well?
Yeah, we went out to breakfast.
Was she still taking drugs?
She had medication she was taking.
Was she taking pain medication, do you know?
I don't know.
Did you go over her medication with her?
No.
352A.
Sustained.
Mr. Durst, so after you go out to breakfast, what do you do then?
The subject.
Last question, 352.
We walked back to Diane's house.
And what did you do after that?
We hung out.
And was she pretty much back to normal at this point?
The 21st, yes.
Did she cook you lunch?
I don't remember if we ate lunch.
And what did you do for dinner?
She cooked.
What did you do that night after dinner?
We watched television and we listened to music.
Did anybody see you while you were at Diane Boucher's house for those 3 days?
Yeah, the neighbors saw me.
What neighbor?
Tom and Mary. I think their last name was Olson.
Was it maybe Tom and Mary Oden?
He used to be the mayor of Trinidad.
So they saw you there, you're saying, correct?
Yeah, they visited us.
And have you spoken to them since about the fact that they have information that supports your version of what happened?
I have not spoken to them since I left Trinidad.
Mr. Durst, why wouldn't you have spoken to witnesses who can support your version of what happened?
Sustained.
I had no idea.
I have a motion to make.
Stricken. Okay.
So, did you actually spend time with Tom and Mary, or did they just see you?
They came over.
So did Diane cook for them as well?
They did not stay for a meal. They just came over.
So, you went to bed that night, is that right?
I did go to bed.
And the next morning, you get up, and did Diane make breakfast again?
This is the 22nd.
Yes.
Diane did not make breakfast again. Diane and I walked to the coffee place in Trinidad and had breakfast.
And then, what time did you leave on the drive?
Around 11.
So, how long did you expect that trip was going to take?
12 or 13 hours.
So, you're going to get there sometime between 11 p.m. and midnight, is that correct?
Correct.
And why were you traveling during this period of time? Why were you traveling that late into the night? Why not leave earlier?
I was sort of dreading the drive.
So, did you drive straight down there?
Well, I stopped for gas probably 2 times.
And what time did you end up pulling up to Susan's?
I did not pull up to Susan's that night. I got off of Route 5 in Bakersfield.
And you indicated that the reason that you pulled off the freeway in Bakersfield, is that correct? Was because you had migraines, is that correct?
Yeah, a special kind of migraine that comes with making you feel dizzy.
And it's your testimony that you had Percocet with you, is that correct?
Correct.
So you decided that because of your headache that you needed to go to a motel, is that right?
Correct.
What's the name of the motel?
I don't remember.
Where was it located?
It was the first hotel off Route 5 when you got to Bakersfield.
Mr. Durst, did you ever try to get any records from that hotel?
Yes, David Fetchheimer, our original investigator, spent a lot of time trying to track down which motel it was. And he said he could not do it. Seemingly they changed hands between now and then.
And Mr. Durst, what name did you check in under?
Robert Durst.
Mr. Durst, weren't you hiding your identity at that time?
No,
So it's your testimony that you checked in under your name, and you always use credit cards when you travel, correct, Mr. Durst?
no, not correct at all. I usually pay in cash.
Mr. Durst, you're aware that we have your American Express records that go back many, many years. You're aware of that, correct?
Yeah,
Do you want me to pull out the American Express records to show all of the charges with your credit card to hotels? I can do that.
I don't care. Do whatever you want. I very frequently pay cash.
So your position is that you do not frequently use a credit card to pay for your hotels, that you generally use cash. Is that your testimony?
I think I use cash more than 50% of the time.
So it's your position that you pull out to this, how big was the motel?
How big was it?
It was a big motel, small motel.
I'd say it was a medium-sized hotel.
But you have no idea what the name of it was, correct?
I don't remember.
So you would agree that you were able to testify, Mr. Durst, how precisely Kathy's coat was draped over the couch on January 31st? What percentage of the coat was at what part of the couch, but you remember nothing further about this hotel, is that correct?
Objection, argument.
Sustained.
Mr. Durst, isn't it true that you are having selective memory
Aren't
right
you
now?
changing your, you're not letting me answer your questions.
No,
Judge
no,
sustained
the
objection.
the judge sustained an objection, Mr. Durst.
So then I can't answer.
Correct. Isn't it true, Mr. Durst, that right now you are using selective memory?
Objection, argument. Overruled.
I am not purposely not remembering something. And this thing with me remembering precisely what percent of the coat was draped over the couch was me taking a guesstimate because I was asked.
Right, but you would agree, Mr. Durst, that's a pretty innocuous detail to remember. Would you agree?
I answered because I was asked.
No, I'm not asking you why you answered. I'm asking you, would you agree that being able to remember such an innocuous detail is somewhat unusual?
No,
So you get to the motel and you immediately check in, is that correct?
correct.
So what's the exact order of what happened once you got to the motel? Maybe this is the place to stop, Your Honor?
Yes. We'll return at 1:30, ladies and gentlemen. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. See you at 1:30.